mean, inspiration, the word is really about breathing things in, right? You know, a lot of people think inspiration comes from the inside out, but it's really more taken into your body and using things that are right in front of your nose. Creativity is really just a state of awareness and readiness to notice things and then use them and combine them and mess with them. And if you do that, you really end up appreciating your life better than other people do. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island. My mom is an Italian immigrant. She was born in Italy. And my mom taught me how to draw. And she's an artist herself. She paints. You know, in a way, my mother was so accepting of the world. I think it really affected the way I grew up, especially commercialism. Like, my mom embraced commercialism. I can remember, you know, if you like Tony the Tiger, she'd get you the Tony the Tiger box, and it was cool for you to watch the commercials and celebrate it, and it was all okay. She was never cynical about commercialism, which was interesting. She kind of embraced it as, you know, part of life. And I think that affected me later, you know, to have it not seem like a bad thing to do. It was not a mercenary thing, it was an artistic thing. My dad was a businessman in Providence in insurance, and a different character altogether. But I remember going to work with him on a weekend one time, and there was a guy there that was running the elevator in this building in Providence, and my dad knew all about this guy. He knew how many kids he had. He knew like where they went to school and what they were doing. And that made a big impression on me because, you know, it made me go, hey, you know, there's something to be learned from every person that you meet. The neighborhood that I grew up in was a pretty blue-collar place and with lots of different kinds of kids, different ethnicities and so on. And it taught me to deal with other kids that were different from me. You know, I was thinking back to, there was a high school teacher the name of this teacher was Michael Romano, and this shows you how important teachers can be, that just glommed onto something that I had written. I can remember what it was. It was kind of like this little reverie that I'd made up. And I remember this guy getting really excited about this idea and coming and saying, this is actually really amazing that you wrote this. And I began to think of myself as somebody that could do that, which is an important thing to give to people. You know, the gift of, you know, going, you could do this. The people you meet in life very often carry gifts for you and you don't know it. You don't pay attention to them. I think one of the important things to do is to develop an appreciation of people and an inviting kind of approach to them so that you get those gifts and you notice them when you get them, because you will get a lot of them. And a lot of times you'll just let them fall through your fingers and you won't even notice them. And years later you'll go, God, now I know what she was saying. I should have done that. I worked as a plumber's apprentice and I worked in a Teamster warehouse in the summer when I was going to college. And again, I think that connected me to a kind of different world than the one that I was living in growing up and where I went to college. And I think it was very helpful for me to understand other people through the eyes of the people that I met as a Teamster. I graduated from college and I wondered what I wanted to do with myself, but I knew it had to do with something that would be about writing and art in some way. So I eventually got a job at a little newspaper north of Boston, and I started to draw political cartoons for this newspaper, which I did. And I was doing that for a while, and I started illustrating for some magazines along with that. And I started taking my book around and showing it to magazines and so on. And eventually I started getting some gigs with like Mother Jones and Time magazine and stuff. So I was doing little things for them. Around that time, I moved to California, following my wife, Jan. I said to her, you know, I will move to California where you grew up, but there's only one place I can stand in California, and that's San Francisco. And I thought, okay, now what? I started thinking, well, I like that advertising thing. Now, you know, maybe that could work. So I thought, I'll just go around and, you know, so I'd bring my book of illustrations and like a bunch of stories about politics in Boston and show them to the creative director. And he or she'd go, yeah, these are nice, and I wouldn't get a job. And as I was going around and around until finally, Charles Martel at McCann Erickson here, who was the creative director, said, dude, you're not gonna get a job this way. You gotta, you know, these are nice, the drawings are good. Advertising people just can't figure this out and figure out why you're useful, okay? So you gotta go away and write some ads. And I said, okay, how do I do that? And he said, well, pick 3 ad campaigns that you love and write 3 new ads in those campaigns. Pick 3 that you hate and reinvent the campaigns for those people. Invent some products for a company, maybe some new products. And then the best thing he said was, write a 1-page autobiography that's funny, that shows that you are a cool guy to work with. I wrote about myself as if it were an encyclopedia entry. And so the first, 6 or 8 sentences were true, grew up here, went to school and so on. And then it would say, one day he had an interview at blank, and I would put like the agency name in there, and then the rest of it was total bullshit. I would be, and he went on and won this and became this, and then he ran this and, became the CEO of the world. So the rest of it was totally made up. And I just passed that in as my resume. And I mean, it worked almost immediately. Like I went into J. Walter Thompson here, and Stu Hyatt was the creative director. And he read the thing and said, this is funny. And he said, we just got the Chevron account. We'll give you a job. So I'm working at J. Walter, and I'm doing fine. And I work on this animated campaign for Chevron.
We're plumb out of dinosaurs, pterodactyls, and the like, and it doesn't look like they're coming back. So don't waste them. The next time you jump in your car, remember,
where there's a dinosaur that comes out of the gas tank and like roars at people and stuff. And this thing gets popular, and somehow Riney sees it, and he calls me up. And he says, well, maybe you'd like to come over and talk to me. And I was like, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who he was. I mean, I was in such a little cocoon at J. Walter. So I went up to one of the older writers at J. Walter, and I said, Hal Riney called me up. Is that good? And he said, you have an interview with God. It was a rainy night, and I took a cab over and went and talked to Hal. And at the end of the interview, he said something like, well, maybe you'd like to come work for us. I can remember going into Riney's conference room all by myself late one afternoon and putting the reel into the machine and watching it and going like, holy shit, this thing is amazing. Like one after another, hilarious, witty, beautiful.
In a town called Vergès, at a spring called Perrier.
Nothing bad on the reel. Like 12 or 15 commercials that were the best commercials anybody was making at the time. That expectation was very great at Riney. And I remember Tom Teach, one of the senior art directors there, was a really funny, terrific guy. He said to me, you're probably intimidated being here, huh? And I said, totally. And he said, you wouldn't be here unless you were good. Don't get intimidated, just have fun. That was great. That was so important to me to have somebody say that. It's moving to me even now. That kind of positivity is just amazing. Because you feel like I can do it. I'm one of these guys. They expect me to be good. Hal hired me across with Dennis McVeigh, who was the art director I was working with at Thompson. We came over together because we had done that work together. And we did some stuff that was really good together, and I thought we were succeeding. And then one day he said to me, we're going to pitch the Oakland A's. And I said, oh, cool. And he said, I want you to work with a different guy. I just hired this guy named Rich Silverstein from Foot Cone, and I want you to work with him. And I said, well, Dennis is a big baseball fan, and I'm a baseball fan. I think we'd like to work on it together. And he said, no, I work on it with this guy. So I said, okay. And so I met Rich, and Rich was not a baseball guy. His sports are like Formula One racing and bike racing and shit. But that was good in a way, because it kept me from doing things that were just like so up my own butt that they wouldn't make any sense to anybody. One of the things that happened in our first meeting with the A's was that they said, we've just hired this new manager, Billy Martin, and that he's a volatile guy.
Uh-oh, Billy's just been tossed out of the game.
He's not going to last. He's going to punch an umpire, or something's going to go wrong. So don't use him in the advertising, whatever you do. You're going to have to do something different. So we went back to the office, and we're sitting in Hal's office, and I say to Hal, well, the only thing they don't want us to do is to use Billy Martin. And he goes, tell me more about Billy Martin. So I tell him a little bit about him. And in the course of telling him, I go, the sports press has this thing that they call Billy Ball that they refer to, and it's like crazy, unpredictable baseball. And Hal went, Billy Ball? That's your tagline. Just use Billy Ball.
What it is a glimpse into a situation like the umpire talking to Billy that you can see from afar, and if you didn't have the soundtrack on, you'd think that it was just a conference at the mound. Billy comes out and says pretty seriously to McCaddy, "You tired?" McCaddy seems to be bothered by something. Look. Remember Leave It to Beaver?
What's wrong?
Remember Leave It to Beaver?
Sure.
What was Wally's best friend's name?
Hey, what's up?
Lumpy?
No. What is this?
Remember Wally's best friend in Leave It to
They
Beaver?
may be discussing how to pitch to this big Boston pinch hitter.
You mean Eddie Haskell?
Well, I guess they've got the game plan straight.
That's why he's the manager.
Billy Ball. It's a different brand of baseball.
I can remember being on the set and saying to him, this is so funny, man, but I grew up in Providence, and my dad taught me to hate the Yankees, and especially you. and I thought to myself, shit, I just told Billy Martin, the craziest man in baseball, that I was taught to hate him. And Billy just smiled and said, isn't baseball great, man? And he just walked away. So I'm working with Silverstein, and things are going well on this Billy Ball front. And eventually, Rich and this guy named Andy Berlin start working on a little software account down in Silicon Valley. It's called Amazing Software. And I start working with them too. And the three of us, actually, this is the first thing we ever did together as a group. We start doing this freelance thing. At the time, game software was kind of like little floppy disks in plastic bags, and they'd hang them on a hook, and it would have like a, crazy graphic on the top in cardboard. And since we came from like the record industry and the rock and roll era, and Rich had actually worked at Rolling Stone, we immediately started going, why aren't they little record covers and with interviews with people inside, and all the stuff that records had, like the sexy graphics and so on. So we started to do that for them, and we did 3 or 4 little things. And in the process, we renamed the company with them. We renamed it Electronic Arts. We did 2 or 3 packages, and we did an ad for them that is still, it's a pretty amazing ad. It's a print ad, and it has a photograph of all of the programmers that they were using at the time. And it was the first time that anybody had ever paid any attention to who wrote video games. Like, we made them into artists. We called them artists in the ad. And the headline of the ad said, "Can a computer make you cry?" It was like a sensation at the time. EA came to us and said, you can do all of our packages if you want. And I can remember going like, oh, do we really want to do that? Do you want to be a packaging agency? And they said, we'll pay you $40,000 a month. And so I was like, okay, we'll do all the packages. The whole thing comes together that we get this EA account. And Andy figures out that we're making enough money on the freelance to be able to rent an office, have a phone, get some typewriters. It gives us the courage to open the agency. And the day that we decided to quit, it's scary to quit to Riney, so I'm putting it off. And Rich is like, let's go quit, let's go quit, let's go quit. Every 5 minutes, he comes to my office, let's go quit. So finally at about 4:30, going to Riney's office, and Riney says, so what brings you boys in here? And Rich goes, tell him. I can remember Riney saying, well, if you get tired of making your own coffee, you could always come back. And we're like, that's sweet. And then he said, maybe you could help us with some new business things now and then. I will give you guys $2,000 a month if you help us with new business. So we were like, sure, that sounds good. So we left. He never asked for it. We never did a thing for him. And then he called me up one day and he said, I don't think I need to send the $2,000 over there anymore. You guys are doing okay. And that was it. It stopped. I think the important thing that we had when we started out, the environment was punk rock. It was things being made without great artistry and sheen to them that were wonderful, like the Sex Pistols and the Ramones and stuff. We loved those bands, and we loved that sort of feel for things. So that in the early going, when we didn't have any money, we embraced that idea of just making stuff look junky and have a good time. I mean, just go with it, because you don't have the money not to go with it. And it was terrible, but it was good terrible.
So God's up in heaven. And he looks down at his calendar and he sees the end of the world is coming up. And he decides that somebody should film it, right? So he has St. Peter go down and shop the property for a director. St. Peter comes back and says he can't find a director. And God says, well, what about Lucas? And St. Peter says, he won't do it. He'll produce it, but he won't direct it.
I think we were very lucky to do it when we did it. I mean, how could you start an agency now and then 5 years later with only 50 people be Agency of the Year in Ad Age, which we did? No, I don't think you could. It would be very hard these days. I think the Got Milk store is a really good example of having something right in front of you and, you know, you either see it or you don't. And I was lucky enough to see it. John Steele, our terrific head of planning at the time, had gone out and he came back and said, well, you know, it seems like the strategy is going to be about something this woman said, where she said, the only time I notice milk is if I run out of it. So I said, oh, that's an amazing strategy. You know, to talk about not having the product as the advertising, that's really cool. That could be kind of a good tagline. Like it could be like the punchline of a commercial that is really seemingly not even about milk, but then you figure out the real problem is that the person doesn't have milk and it says got milk and then you put it all together.
And that was the Vienna Wood Dance in D, one of my all-time favorites. And now let's make that random call with today's $10,000 question. It's a tough one. Who shot Alexander Hamilton in that famous duel? All right, let's go to the phones and see who's out there.
Hello?
Hello, for $10,000, who shot... Excuse me?
Hold on, let me get some milk. No!
I'm afraid your time is almost up. I'm sorry, maybe next time.
Got milk?
It was just amazing that, you know, you could take Got Milk and do something that far afield. I don't think that we are as well known as some other agencies for one account or one kind of style of work or one kind of spirit. I think that we have lots of different styles, which has been good. I think that we need people in this business that don't come through the traditional avenues. You know, they were art directors on magazines, they worked at newspapers, they were geographers or lawyers, but people that come at it from a different angle, because I think that's what makes things different in the end. And I think we have to be welcoming about that and try harder to find those people.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
I've tried to make advertising that's like that. You know, I try to make advertising that is like part of your life and that people welcome into their lives. My kids have always been a part of that, you know. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is to have your kids hate something that you made. Jan's funny because I don't think she loves advertising that much, and it kind of keeps me grounded. I mean, advertising is a weird thing. It's a weird combination of judgment and forgiveness. And, you know, you're always judging people. You're always telling them, it didn't work, sorry, go back and do it again. But, you know, I always try to instill a certain confidence in that, like, you can come up with something else. Like, a lot of times, you throw something away. I think it's important to throw things away and start over. Because many times that liberates you, and you look back at the first thing you did and went, God, it's a good thing we didn't do that. You know, one of the things that life is about is going back again and again and again to get something. And if you look into people that are successful, they almost always have a story about not giving up. Just keep, like, doing it. You have to think that way.